What's up, YouTubers and Cinephiles? Welcome back to another edition of Nerd with me, John Ricky here. But before we begin, do me a favor and subscribe to Nerd with me. And you know what? Click that notification bell so you can get more great content like you're about to receive. Now, today's Flicks Talk is a special one about summer movies, particularly a series that's been going on for 22 years now, which is pretty incredible considering that it's been the same characters for each and every one of the entries, as well as the actors that have played them. Yes, we're talking about the Mission Impossible series, in which the latest entry, Fallout, is dominating the box office, particularly the summer blockbuster of this year. Besides Avengers, but that's more of like a springtime thing, and it had its run, it did great, but here we go. This series is so unique in the fact that each entry seems to have been getting better, and there hasn't been one that's like really like, oh my god, it's really terrible, except for maybe two. But I digress, and we're gonna go through the whole history of these films leading up to the newest one. So let's go back into a time machine to 1996. Tupac was king, and unfortunately the king had fallen in that year. A whole bunch of other things happened, and also this was Tom Cruise's first year as producer with his anointed Cruise Wagner Productions, and the first production is Mission Impossible, based off of the 60s television series of the same name, about a team of American espionage task force that do everything to work as a team, and obviously have the various motifs and so on and so forth. But basically it's like America's version of James Bond, except instead of relying on one particular agent, it relies on a whole crew of agents to get the job done. But of course, obviously he was a big fan as a child, and he wanted to bring it to the big screen with him starring in it, and we get Brian De Palma, one of the masters of suspense, arguably right under Alfred Hitchcock in terms of filmmakers that specialize in suspense thriller movies. De Palma's probably, if not second to Alfred Hitchcock, he's at least like in the top 5. And of course he got his start directing Stephen King with the amazing Carrie, starring Sissy Spacek. And of course Scarface with Al Pacino, and I think he was just coming off of his second outing with Al Pacino in Carlito's Way. Now personally, I remember this movie as being like, oh wow, it's an American version of James Bond, literally, and it was all about the team. So I was expecting a whole bunch of action, so on and so forth, but my, 96, 12-year-old little mind was like, where's the action? What the hell is this? Even though I still enjoyed it, and it was a very interesting story, and especially for the fact that you got this star-studded cast at the time, with Tom Cruise obviously headlining it. You had Emilio Estevez, who I'm still like, oh shoot, that's Billy the Kid from Young Guns, what's up? Kristen Scott Thomas, who that year had a monster year. She was nominated for Best Actress in English Patient and so on and so forth. Amazing actress. And Jon Voight, who's a Hollywood legend, and Jean Reno, who I am like, oh my god, at this point he's like, yo, that's Leon, what's up? And of course the awesome Ving Rhames. I was geek watching this, and my 12-year-old mind was like, man, there's not enough action here. I just come off of watching GoldenEye, which to me is top 3 James Bond films ever. You know, that, Goldfinger, and Skyfall. But that's for another video. But you know what, I really liked it for the fact that, man, it is really suspenseful, and it's a very simple story. I mean, it's basically about this team trying to get the MacGuffin, which is the knock list. That's the thing that sets it into motion. And the knock list is a list of agents in deep cover around the world, be it in IMF, which is their organization, CIA, all the acronyms in, covert ops, but it listed their identities. And that's the main portion of the story. And it is very entertaining. You know, I mean, not for like what I was expecting from James Bond, but then it's like you got to think of, hey, this is not James Bond exactly. This is a suspenseful, taut thriller, and they got the right guy to direct it with Brian De Palma. Like, he lives for this stuff. If you go through Brian De Palma's repertoire besides Scarface, and you know what, even in Scarface and Carlito's Way, there's a whole bunch of suspense leading up to the violence that predicates those extravagant crime dramas. But all his other stuff outside of, you know, Carlito's Way and Scarface, like, it's all suspense thrillers through and through, and he delivers some of the great suspenseful scenes, particularly with Tom Cruise in that computer room being held up by just strings like a puppet, and it's just like, oh my god, you hold your breath through that whole thing, that whole sequence, and you're just like, wow, this is awesome. You know, and even before that, with him meeting up with one of the main characters, Jim Phelps, who's played by, I can't remember the actor's name, but he was always good at that kind of jag-off boss, might be shady sort of deal, and he plays that excellently. The movie is a taut thriller through and through. I can't really see any problems with it, you know, particularly now, because like if you would have asked me 10-15 years ago, I probably would have said like, nah, it's kind of lacking action, but at the age I'm at right now, it's like, man, nah, that's just a taut thriller through and through. It didn't need the action, it was just all about suspense, and you got that. And of course, and also, I mean, you gotta go with the fact that half the daggone cast gets killed up within the first like 30 minutes of the movie, and it's just like, wow, okay, sorry, spoiler, and you're just like, okay, where do they go from here? Man, it gets good. And the way it ends, you're just like, alright, twists, turns, this is a good film. The music was a top. The music was very profound and perfect for the type of suspense that happened throughout the movie. I mean, they had this great character named Maxine, and like she worked like a charm, and it everything fell into place. So on that note, I give Mission Impossible, the original.
Life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get.
Yeah, man, I mean, I really liked it. The one thing I say, it could have used a little bit more action, but at the same time, you know, it's a thriller through and through. So it works amazing that way. Next, we're going with Mission Impossible 2, where basically they up the ante in terms of like what I thought was missing from the first one, which is a whole bunch of action. And directed by action maestro by way of Hong Kong, John Woo, who crossed over to the American audiences 7 years before the movie came out in 2000, so he came to America in about 1993 with Hard Target, but he had classic films in his native, you know, Hong Kong cinema with A Better Tomorrow. Chow Yun-fat was his spirit animal. Started with A Better Tomorrow in 1986, then he went on to do A Better Tomorrow 2, and with his two classic movies with The Killer and Hard Boiled, which to me still has one of the best gun battles ever put to celluloid. Now, me as a Hong Kong aficionado and just an action, I knew about John Woo, and it seemed like a perfect marriage with him and a covert ops James Bond type film. I wanted him to direct an edition of James Bond, but hey, he went to Mission Impossible. And how did it turn out? You know what? It's weird. It's weird for me to say this, but it was way too much damn action and not enough story. And I was just like, what is happening here? It didn't feel right. Because, I mean, the action was good. You know, he has this motif with doves. There was a lot of doves going on, a lot of slow motion, which is like, that's his calling card. Like how Spike Lee likes to have people walking, except they seem like they're floating on air. You know, that was his call. That's his style. And it just wasn't working in this. I mean, the action was decent, but the storyline was very generic, and it's like, oh, there's this virus, and it was like barely there, and I felt bad for like all the actors involved, and it starts Thandie Newton as a love interest, and you know, she's always awesome. But the movie itself was just like, it was okay, and it was just like, alright, this is bombastic, and it was just a little bit too much to what I thought I wanted, and I'm like, maybe I didn't want that as much, like maybe somewhere in the middle. But I'll tell you this, man, side note, I think Mission Impossible was the first time, the whole series as a whole, when I started noticing that Tom Cruise tends to run in all of his movies, hence the phrase Tom Cruise run, because he has a very unique running style. But I digress. But yeah, man, it didn't really have like a great villain. Like John Voight as the villain in the original one. If you haven't seen it, where have you been? This one compared to it, played by Dougray Scott. And by the way, side note, he was supposed to be Wolverine before Hugh Jackman, and he was busy shooting this film. Actually, thank God. But yeah, man, it was very forgettable. Even though it was solid, but it wasn't like, oh my God, amazing. And it was that sophomore slump in a series. Kind of happens sometimes. But anyway, Mission Impossible 2 receives.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Yeah, man, I mean, it was still like fun to have. It was a blockbuster, but it was definitely pretty forgettable. So this leads to Mission Impossible 3. A mere 6 years later, 2006. It was actually supposed to come out 3 years before with Joe Carnahan directing, and he was coming off a great indie effort that was also produced by Tom Cruise's company, Narc, which was incredible in its own right. And unfortunately, whatever happened behind the scenes, it just didn't go about. Now, personally, to me, I'm actually curious to see what he would have brought to it. He probably would have brought more of a team element, but as the series goes on, it kind of felt like Ethan Hunt was Tom Cruise's answer to James Bond, and he just had his team along for the ride. Not that that's completely bad, but it's just kind of noticeable a little bit, but at this point. But anyway, Joe Carnahan was out, and we get up-and-comer J.J. Abrams, who was killing it in television with Alias, so it's kind of like a very cool transition in there, but it's his first feature film, and it's a $150 million movie. You're like, oh my God, how is he going to do this? And he ends up being a producer on it, and wow. Okay, Ving Rhames is back, and now we get Simon Pegg to join up. It's like a match made in heaven, man. Whoa! And this is the one where they started to find their stride. It was a combination of the overhanded thrillerness of the first one, and combined with the action, amazing bombastic action of the second one. And it was a perfect meld of the two. And of course, you can't go wrong with Philip Seymour Hoffman playing an amazing villain. And in this one, Tom Cruise gets a love interest in the shape of Michelle Monaghan. And this really sets the standard for the rest of the series up until today, because they have very endearing characters. I mean, you can feel the love and admiration between Simon Pegg and Ving Rhames and Tom Cruise. They work well together. You feel like they're a complete unit, and you generally get a great storyline. It also is kind of personal in terms of the character Ethan Hunt, and it really works well. I mean, you got the great gadgetry of a usual James Bond film, as well as the team effort of the Mission Impossible, ilk, and it just works in a great synergy that you're just like, wow, alright, I want to see more. I can't wait for the next one. On that note, Mission Impossible 3 gets a big glaring,
you had my curiosity, but now you have my attention.
Yeah, man, up until that moment, like, that was the best in the series. It was a complete combination of the first two meshed together, and then we had, I believe, a 5-year hiatus. And that leads me to Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. Directed by none other than Brad Bird, the mastermind behind the Incredible series, as well as the Iron Giant. Man, and it was his first live-action film. Bruh, I gotta say, you get Ethan Hunt back, and with every entry, this is how Tom Cruise is right now, there's always this one stunt, this one crazy stunt that you're just like, how is he doing that? Why is he doing that? He is insane. And he got him climbing up the tallest building in the world in Dubai, and you're just like, oh my god, this is like, and it is gut wrenching. It is or gut churning, because you're watching this man and there's no strings attached. He's doing it by himself with as many safety hazards as he can do physically possible. It's no CG. This man is literally climbing up the Dubai tallest building in the world. Your palms are sweating. Not only that, but just Brad Bird directs it in such a way with such fervor and intelligence. Is a pulse pounding, action oriented. It ups the ante of Mission Impossible 3 and takes it to the next level. It's like, how do you beat that? And plus, on top of the fact that up until now, especially with 2 and 3, it kind of felt like it was the Ethan Hunt show, where this one, it really brings back more of the team effort from the first third of the original movie, and really has everyone have their moment, including Simon Pegg, Ving Rhames, so on and so forth. And it really works great, as well as it almost goes into a superhero territory with how many stunts he does in this film and barely gets hurt. It's like, but it's not ridiculous. It's really like, you can suspend the disbelief about it, and it is amazing. It is fast paced, it is taut. Even though it's a little bit cliche with the certain situations that happen in there, but you don't care because it's such an enjoyable blockbuster. And on that note, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol gets a big
I'll be back.
Yeah, man, if you ask me, to me, that's like the best in the series. That's the standard, and we are going to move on to Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. And of course, this has become a tradition with Tom Cruise and the Mission Impossible series, is the fact that he gotta up the ante with a new crazy ass stunt, and this time he's hanging himself literally on the side of an airplane, and it is glorious and crazy, and you're just like, wow, that's some dedication right there. On top of that, it has a story that is solid, directed by Christopher McQuarrie, who is more famous for his writings as a Usual Suspects, which was an amazing caper, by the way. And again, this film is a nice combination of the first two films. You got great action, as well as a thrilling, enthralling thriller. And also on top of that, you get introduced to a new amazing character. I believe her name is Elsa, I want to say, played by Rebecca Ferguson, who she steals the show the whole time. You're like, wow, she's basically the female Ethan Hunt, and she's incredible and very, very, very capable. Some very good intrigue, some very good action. I will say that the character, the villain of the movie, is like kind of stock and kind of don't remember him, but at the same time, he actually is a decent antagonist. This is one of the first times that the character actually lives, so that was a different pace, but it really, really brings home like just a whole combination of it. It is a good continuation from Ghost Protocol, but there are some points in the film where you're just like, alright, come on, end it. Even though you're really enjoying Rebecca Ferguson's character along with Ethan Hunt's character, and they really work well together. But on that note, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation is kind of simplistic, but at the same time, it gets a...
Life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get.
Yeah, man, there's some problems with it, but you know what, I really like the introduction of Rebecca Ferguson's character. She's actually a really good mainstay. Again, it is solid in action and intrigue, but not to the point of Ghost Protocol. But it is still an enjoyable ride. It was worth the money. Now this brings me to the final stage of this history of a long-standing series, 22 years, same characters, same actors, same producer. And it all culminates in the newest edition that just came out this past weekend with Mission Impossible Fallout. Obviously starring Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt, Vin Rames is Luthor, and Simon Pegg is, I can't really remember his character's name, but it's Simon Pegg, so he's awesome. And mainstay now with Rebecca Ferguson. Now, I have to say, the series as a whole is incredible for the fact that each entry has either been on the same level or is just as amazing or even better than the previous one. I mean, particularly ever since Mission Impossible 2, Mission Impossible 3 was amazing, and then Ghost Protocol, to me, is the penultimate of the whole series. And Rogue Nation was amazing in its own right. And this one, wow, I mean, it really does, they really hit their stride with 3. Whereas they combined the first 2, which, like, the first one was all suspense, barely any action, and then the second one was like all action and barely any suspense. And ever since then, they've been upping the ante with bigger, stunts, bigger storylines, and it has been improving ever since. Almost to a comic book degree, a la Fast and Furious, but you know what, even with the Fast and Furious ones, it doesn't have the realism that Mission Impossible has, because Tom Cruise does it without CG. I mean, let's face it, I love the Fast and Furious series, particularly after the third one. I mean, they've been getting better and better, but yeah, like the last one is just feel like a comic book. I mean, it's to that point. And this one is actually, this Mission Impossible, it feels almost like the same way, but actually there's some realism to it. I mean, especially with Tom Cruise being 56 and everything like that. And you really feel with this film that it's like, alright, if he is there for the next one, he better be passing on the torch. Because it really just feels like there needs to be a new blood. And they try to do that with Ghost Protocol with, Jeremy Renner's character possibly taking over, but then it just kind of like rebound that back with Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, which I think was a misstep. But, I mean, it's not taken away from the fact that the story is really good. And this really does up the ante. I mean, I have to say, this probably has one of the best bathroom fight scenes since True Lies, man. I mean, it is incredible. It's really great choreography. Henry Cavill of Superman fame, or Man of Steel fame, he really should have just stayed with this. And honestly, with what he did in this iteration of Mission Impossible, it's like, man, you know what, if Daniel Craig's gonna stand down after this next James Bond, give it to Henry Cavill, man. I mean, he deserves it. He really goes toe-to-toe with an icon, a legend, Tom Cruise. And you know what, him and Tom Cruise in the same scene together, they really bounce off each other like they've been friends for 20 freaking years. And their dichotomy is really organic, and it really works very well. And great action sequences. I mean, Rebecca Ferguson is awesome in this film, and it feels like we just really picked up where the last movie left off, and it's so organic. But I will say this film feels like it really should be the last film for Ethan Hunt. It feels like it's an end, especially with everything that happens in the film, which is both dramatic and exciting at the same time. But with everything that goes on, it's like the big encompassing of the whole series as a whole. Whereas you can almost name this movie, instead of Mission Mission Impossible Fallout, you can really call it Mission Impossible Murphy's Law, because everything that can go wrong does go wrong, and it's all about how this team, headed by Ethan Hunt, tries to pick up the pieces afterwards. Because there's portions in this movie where you're just like, man, Angela Bassett and Alec Baldwin basically just dog them out right in front of them, and it's like, yeah, you messed up, da 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 da. And you're just like, yeah, you did mess up. And this is just them trying to pick up the pieces. I mean, that's the gist of this film. And it does have a great connection to the original villain of the previous movie, and how he has a personal vendetta against Ethan Hunt. And, you know, it works organically. They bring back characters that you're like, oh, wow, it actually works organic to the story, where you're just like, you know what? Yeah, I can roll with that. And there is a few parts in here that the action, I mean, there's so much action here, but you know what? It's so prevalent and worth it, and really melds well into the story. And even the twists and turns of it harkens back to the original film, that's where it was all about. It was all about the twist, the taut thriller aspect, but it melds so beautifully with the action that's incorporated into it that you're just like, wow, I don't know what's going to happen next, but it is freaking awesome. But that being said, there's also points in this movie you're just like, alright, Tom Cruise is basically Gumby. You know, it's like, he can't be hurt. He's like Mr. Fantastic. He just gets hit by a damn car, and he just walks away from it. And you're like, no, he needs to be like, you know, having like, you know, a broken arm, something, you know, at least a fracture or something. But you can really roll with it because of the way the story folds out. You don't care. You're just like, man, this is really thrilling. There's a lot of twists and turns, even though you know like who the bad guy is and so on and so forth. You have to check it out yourself. It's an amazing film, especially for this dreadful summer that has had like mediocre movies like Ant-Man. I mean, you name it, they kind of been underperforming, to be honest. But this, in my opinion, is the best summer movie of 2018 so far. And on that note, I give it a nice big
I'll be back.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, this series has stayed up for the past 22 years with the same characters, same actors, coming back and forth. I mean, that is unheard of. I mean, even for the James Bond series, the longest running James Bond was Roger Moore, and in my opinion, he's the weakest James Bond we've ever had, and he only lasted 12 years. This series has been going on for 22 years, since 1996, and here it is, 2018. They just released their sixth film, and it doesn't show any sign of stopping. But I will say this, where the story goes with this newest addition into the Mission Impossible series, it's time for Tom Cruise to like pass the torch. You know, I mean, the whole time he's in there, and I'm thinking like, man, could you at least give him a, you know, Mr. Fantastic type of like, you know, like little gray hairs around his temples or something like that? It's like, dude, you've been doing it for 22 years already. He should be aged, especially at the end, and you're like seeing him, he looks kind of gruff a little bit, and he got grays in there. It's like, man, come on. You gotta pass it on. Anyway, it's amazing. You definitely should check it out. Anyway, YouTubers and City Files, how did you feel about Mission Impossible Fallout? Did you like it? Did you think it was a little too action? But don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to Nerd With Me Reviews. Let's talk about this, people. Y'all take care.